1989, police in British Columbia closed a case with 3 words: death by unknown means. But that verdict did not begin in 1989. It began 7 years earlier. A nurse named Cindy James had been calling authorities over and over again. Nearly 100 reports, phone calls in the night, anonymous letters, unexplained disturbances inside her home. Investigators searched for someone responsible. They never found one. Then she disappeared. Her car was found in a shopping plaza parking lot, groceries still inside. 2 weeks later, she was discovered in the yard of an abandoned house nearly 40 kilometers away, her hands and feet secured, a nylon stocking around her neck, prescription medication in her system. For years, she said someone was watching her. In the end, the only confirmed truth was uncertainty, and the deeper you look into this case, the more that uncertainty grows. For nearly 7 years, Cindy James said someone was inside her life. Not physically seen, not identified, but present. Phone calls in the middle of the night, silence on the other end. Letters with no return address, doors that did not stay locked, lights that turned on when she hadn't touched them. She told police someone was watching her, listening, waiting. Between 1982 and 1989, she made nearly 100 reports to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Nearly 100. That is not a single moment of panic. That is a pattern. Investigators responded. They documented each complaint. They searched for forced entry. They dusted for prints. They canvassed neighbors. But every time, the evidence dissolved. No confirmed intruder. No verified third party. No one ever caught outside her home. And slowly, something shifted, because fear without proof becomes doubt. Cindy James was a 44-year-old registered nurse living in Richmond, British Columbia. By all outward appearances, she was stable, responsible, intelligent. Friends described her as private, reserved, but not dramatic. Her marriage had ended before the reports began. After the separation, the incidents started. Threatening phone calls, anonymous letters. On at least one occasion, she reported a male voice saying, "I'll get you one day, Cindy." That sentence stayed in the file. "I'll get you one day." Years passed. The reports continued, but no one could confirm who was speaking, or if anyone was, and that uncertainty would define everything that followed. As the years moved forward, the incidents did not stop. They escalated. Cindy reported finding objects moved inside her home. Personal items disturbed, messages referencing her routines. She claimed someone had entered her house without permission. Police investigated repeatedly. They conducted surveillance. They monitored her calls. They interviewed people in her life. They reviewed the possibility of a former partner, a coworker, or someone from her past. Nothing definitive emerged. No suspect. No consistent physical evidence. At times, Cindy was discovered unconscious outside her home. On another occasion, she was found restrained inside. Medical treatment was required. Yet again, investigators found no clear sign of an outside individual. Authorities began consulting mental health professionals. Psychological evaluations were conducted. Some investigators quietly considered whether the events might be self-generated. But others hesitated, because staging something repeatedly for nearly 7 years would require remarkable consistency and endurance. Friends were divided. Some believed Cindy without hesitation. They saw fear in her. Others noticed something else: isolation, stress, exhaustion. Police allocated significant resources to the case. Surveillance operations lasted days. Investigators followed her movements. Still, no third party was definitively identified. The longer the case continued without answers, the more it became something else. Not just a potential crime, but a question of credibility. By the late 1980s, the file was thick. Dozens of reports, photographs, statements, logs, but still no name. And with every unanswered call, every unexplained incident, skepticism grew quietly inside the investigation. Officers compared time. They analyzed patterns of behavior. They questioned whether certain events occurred only when Cindy was alone. They examined whether the disturbances followed predictable cycles. Some began to believe the case was no longer about identifying a suspect. It was about understanding Cindy herself. Yet there was no clear confession, no definitive proof that the events were staged, only suspicion. And suspicion is not resolution. Then came May 25th, 1989. Cindy did not appear for work. That was unusual. She had gone shopping earlier that day. Her car was later found in a shopping plaza parking lot. Groceries still inside, personal belongings present. There were signs of disturbance near the vehicle, but nothing conclusive. No clear timeline explaining how she left the scene. No confirmed witness placing her somewhere else. For the first time in 7 years, there were no more phone calls, no more letters, no more reports, just absence. Days passed. Search efforts continued. Friends waited. Investigators retraced familiar ground. But this time, Cindy was not reporting the fear. She was missing, and without her voice documenting the threat, the case felt suddenly hollow. On June 8th, 1989, nearly 2 weeks after she disappeared, Cindy James was found in the yard of an abandoned house in Richmond. The location was approximately 40 kilometers from where her car had been located. It was not part of her routine. When discovered, her hands and feet were secured behind her back. A nylon stocking was around her neck. Toxicology testing later revealed high levels of multiple prescription medications in her system. The scene raised immediate questions. How had she traveled that distance? How had she ended up restrained? Was another person involved? Or had the events unfolded differently than they appeared? Investigators examined the terrain surrounding the abandoned property. They assessed accessibility. They reviewed whether someone could have transported her unnoticed. They considered timelines based on decomposition and environmental exposure. The investigation resumed with intensity. Officers reviewed prior reports again. They examined patterns. They revisited the years of harassment claims. The physical circumstances were unusual, but unusual does not automatically mean external involvement. Authorities faced two deeply uncomfortable possibilities. Either someone had managed to harass Cindy for nearly 7 years without leaving reliable evidence, or the incidents had originated from within her own life. Both scenarios were troubling. If there had been a long-term aggressor, that person had operated with extraordinary caution. If the events were self-generated, the psychological complexity was profound. In 1990, a coroner's inquest was held. Testimony was presented. Medical findings reviewed. Investigative conclusions examined. Experts discussed the toxicology results. Law enforcement explained the years of reports. After deliberation, the jury reached a verdict that reflected uncertainty. Death by unknown means. 3 words. And yet they resolved nothing. Not homicide. Not a confirmed self-generated event. Unknown. For some, that verdict acknowledged the complexity of the case. For others, it felt like surrender. Cindy's family strongly disputed the idea that she had orchestrated the events herself. They argued that the physical circumstances were difficult to reconcile with that conclusion. Investigators maintained that no verified evidence confirmed a long-term aggressor. The debate never truly ended, because the case does not fit neatly into a single explanation. If someone had been targeting her, they left almost no trace. If she had been responsible for the incidents herself, the consistency and duration were extraordinary. Nearly 7 years, nearly 100 reports, years of fear documented in official files. What makes the case endure is not spectacle. It is ambiguity. It is the space between two explanations. Neither fully proven. There was medication in her system. There were restraints. There was distance between disappearance and discovery, but there was no definitive bridge connecting every piece, just fragments. Fragments that could be interpreted in more than one way. The file was eventually closed. But closure requires certainty, and certainty never came. To this day, the Cindy James case remains one of Canada's most debated, unresolved investigations. It forces a difficult question. How long can fear exist without confirmation before it changes how we see the person reporting it? At what point does doubt become stronger than sympathy? For nearly 7 years, Cindy James said someone was watching her. In the end, the only confirmed truth was this. No one could prove who that someone was, and sometimes uncertainty is more unsettling than any answer.